What's up, superstars? On today's video, we're gonna be diving into the world of digital magic. We're gonna be transforming one of our artwork here and giving it a full embroidery effect, as you guys can see here. Yes, there's actually no stitching here. We're gonna share exactly how we did this with all the programs we used, and at the very end, we're actually gonna be pressing this onto a Threadfast apparel denim jacket. So this is the jacket we're gonna be using. You definitely don't wanna miss out. We're gonna show you how you guys can create this amazing piece with DTF and just a few artwork tools. So you definitely wanna watch to the very end. Let's go ahead and go, guys.
We're gonna be using two tools today. These are Photoshop tools that you can import, and they are actions. Once you have the files, you can just import them to your Photoshop, and we'll have the link in the description below. So without any further ado, let's get started. So here's my artwork, and as you can see, it looks like a very decent artwork. The quality is good, and of course what we want is to make an embroidery effect. The first thing we need to do is to make the artboard bigger, since the embroidery effect would like to go over the edges of the artboard is toe-to-toe with the edges. What we can do is press C, and this is the crop tool. You can just also go right here and click on the crop tool. Then it'll show like this. We can make the artboard bigger if you hold Alt and drag it on the edge. It's going to be pulled out evenly so we can make the artwork bigger and even for all sides. So maybe something like this should be good enough, and now that the artboard is bigger, our embroidery effect won't go over the artwork. And you'll see how it's going to affect later on. For now, let's make a duplicate layer of our original artwork by pressing Ctrl J. Let's just hide the first layer. Let's call this Original and the second one to Main. Let's just turn the original off and leave all its attributes so we don't destroy it. If we make any mistakes, we can always go back and get the original file. Once you're settled and everything's set up, the first thing you need to do is to make a color separation. And to separate the colors on this one, it doesn't have to be very accurate, but it would depend on how many borders of your embroidery effect you want. So for this one, we're going to be very specific with the amount and intensity of the colors that we're going to pick. For example, let's start with the black one. You can just go to Select Color Range. Let's select the black, and you can just control how much of the black you want to select. But of course, as I said, we're not going to be very precise with the color. Just so that we can separate the dark and light areas, maybe something like this should be good enough. It selects most of the black areas, and it would probably select even the gray ones. But you can notice that it's not solid. It has some sort of transparency behind it. You can see the transparency grid. So what you need is to turn this one into a solid layer. We can do that by just duplicating this one so that it becomes thicker. We can press Ctrl J, and after one try, there are still areas that aren't solid. So we need to do this a couple or more times. Until you get everything as solid as it can be, there are still spots right here. Then hold Shift and click on the first layer that you started with. Press Ctrl E, this will rasterize every layer that you've selected. And if you click Ctrl J again, it should go back and just do the same thing we did earlier until every single color is now solid. That looks pretty good, and this is black. These are the dark colors that have been selected with our color range. You can see some spots right here that we might want to delete. Just press E to go to the eraser tool and just roughly clean it up. It doesn't even really have to be very precise as well, but it's good to keep it clean. Let's zoom out. It's looking pretty good. Let's put it behind us and then lock it for now. We still have a lot of other colors to separate. Since we're done with blacks, let's try the whites. The light-colored ones may be like this. Yeah, maybe something like this. Most of the whites have been selected. Press Ctrl J again, so it will now create just the white areas. You can't probably see it that much. So let's go here. I had a solid color. Something dark, then just put it underneath so you can now see it. Let's try to lower the opacity a bit so that we can see which areas are not solid. These areas are not solid, these as well. Again, we need to duplicate the layer until everything becomes solid. Click Ctrl E to combine them. Don't be afraid to go overboard with duplicating it, just to make sure everything is solid, since that might cause errors or unwanted effects to show up later on. We must make sure everything is solid. It looks pretty solid now, so you can just rename this as the paint whites. Let's hide this one, delete the color, and let's also lock the white ones. The next one should be pink, I guess. There are only a few colors in this. If you look at the bigger picture, it might be very overwhelming since it looks like there are a lot of colors, but we only take the main colors from our selections. Include the nearest ones, so black, white, pink, and that should be most of it. Something like this, maybe a bit more. Yeah, so you need to get dark pink in here. Make sure we got something like this. So this should be good. And these are the faces. So most of the colors are now selected, but you can see there are still areas right here that are the blue ones. Just press on this. Select similar. So it just selects the colors to what I chose. Just press Ctrl J. It's a pretty thin layer, so it won't be that difficult. And let's see what else. Probably the teeth. Maybe this one. Select a color range. Yeah, let's use this one. Let's add 2 or more colors that can be selected. Maybe like this, that. So we still need this one and this one. Press Ctrl J, hide everything again, and just duplicate it as much as we can. Make it solid again. Let's take this back, bring the main layer to the back, and see if everything is now selected. So it looks pretty decent. Everything should almost be there. So now we start with using the effects on the artwork. So let's lock everything else and just do one layer at a time. It might cause some errors if you do a lot. Each time, we're trying to avoid those errors. So this is the action that we got through Realistic Embroidery 2.0, and there are only 4 actions in here, and most of the time you only need to use 2. So the first one is to set up borders. You just have to click Run on it. It might take a while depending on your computer, but you should always avoid pressing anything else while the action is running. There are a lot of steps in each action, so it might take longer than the one in this video. So just be patient with it so that you don't encounter any unnecessary errors. The bigger and more complicated your file is, the longer it takes. Like this one, it's pretty complicated. It has a lot of edges to trace. This is the first layer. This will show the step-by-step process. And just play it. The third one is Render All. All right, now that it's done, this is how our first layer looks. It looks pretty good. The texture is everything else in here. Texture the borders. There are a lot of stitching effects. It's now color blue, and in every layer that we do, we have to go here. Click on the smart object, this little icon right here, like the document icon. It'll take you inside the layer and just turn up a couple of settings here, like the drop shadow. The color for the border and the color for the seam so it'll look gray. Well, this place, and once everything's done, just save it. Once you close, this main layer would look like this. You can now delete this original one, so it would now look like this. Let's turn the black one off and let's go back to step 1 setup and borders press play. Now that it's almost done doing the second step. And and render again. So we would have to do this for each color that we separated and then combine everything later on. The more colors that you have in your artwork, the longer it might take, so it will depend on how many colors that you have. Same thing, click on the Smart object, turn off everything like the last one we did, and then save it. Let's take a look at how it looks so far. Looks pretty good with a lot of the stitching, and as you can now see, the colors that we separated make the border for each side, making it look better. Let's just put this back. Okay. All right, all the colors with their effects on, and it would look now like this. Still doesn't look that much since it all grayed out, but remember the main layer we had earlier. Let's bring that to the very top layer. Then in this one, let's change the color blending to overlay and now look like this. The colors are now applied. You can just make some tweaks to how you'd like it. Maybe go with blending options and change something to how you want it. But it would be up to you how deep the effect you want to be or how much the color should be cut. All ready, and can even make another copy if you want more saturation and set the opacity down or up. On how much you want, but of course, I'm not going to do that. I'm pretty satisfied with how it looks right now. It's pretty good, almost everything is covered and has some texture in it. So let's now trim it. Click Alt IR to trim this one, and it should look like this, and let's just save it. So whatever you like, whatever you want to name it, just save it, and we can stop right here. If you're pretty satisfied with how it looks, you can just stop right here and do this one. Do this effect alone. But if you want to go the extra mile, add more, even more borders and threads. Let's go to the next step. And this one is the embroidery patch maker, so let's drag this template right here. I did it ahead. So let's just delete everything that I did. And of course, this one is the file we did earlier. Just to show you, just click on this. Add text. It is the Smart object again, just like what we did earlier. Click on it. It'll take you to a new layer. Drag your artwork right here, the one you did before. This is the default one. Just close that and hide it, then show your layer. Control Save and it should appear right here. Then, since we had two effects, let's close this one. And this is the embroidery patch maker, so you have two options of using the blue or black jeans. It's going to change it a little bit depending on which one you can choose. So let's use the black jeans for this one as an example. So this one's going to be pretty quick. It's easy, so I will add everything like this. So if you look at the edges, this is what we were trying to avoid earlier, and it's getting cut off. So you can just do it over again and do the first thing we did, like press on Crop C crop tool. Make it slightly bigger just so that it doesn't get cut off, especially this one. Its effect covers a lot more on the outside than on the first one we used, which is mostly on the inside. Just run it again and see if it doesn't get cut off like the first one we did. So it now looks like this, which looks pretty good. And of course, the background isn't going to be in there. It's going to be looking like this. And if you are fine with the messy look, you can just keep it as is. Just save it for now. If you want to change something, you can make tweaks right here. This would make a lot of layers along the way. You can tweak everything and turn it on and off to show what goes in and goes out. Just see for yourself what you want and what you don't want. So we don't need this one. Let's turn the bevel off. I want to make it very clean on the edge, but still give its thread effects. And the color pink on this. That looks good. Copy the hex code. Try to place it on the other layers. Looks pretty good. You can even use whatever color you want if you want to make it more colorful. But of course, I want to keep it in theme. Of course, everything being pink doesn't always work out, so let's try to use some whites in there as well. Something like that just makes this white. So it would be up to you how you want the threads to look like or what their color is. But for the most part, it's going to be like this. So once you're done, you can just trim it again so that the excess edges are cut off. And of course, this time it won't cut off the edges that are almost overlapping earlier. So if you're satisfied with it and how you did the threads on the outside, you can just save it now. And once you save it, let's say you want to keep it in PDF. You can just keep it in a low file size. You can just turn off Preserve Photoshop editing capabilities, but you won't be able to edit it. Once you do this, if your project feels like you still want to make some edits along the way, just keep this on. But it will be a lot heavier than the one when it is turned off. So let's just close this one and that should be it.